The Golden Crab. Once upon a time there was a fisherman who had a wife and 3 children. Every morning he used to go out fishing, and whatever fish he caught he sold to the king. One day, among the other fishes, he caught a golden crab. When he came home, he put all the fishes together in a great dish, but he kept the crab separate because it shone so beautifully and placed it up on a high shelf in the cupboard. Now, while the old woman, his wife, was cleaning the fish, and had tucked up her gown so that her feet were visible, she suddenly heard a voice, which said, "Get down, let down thy petticoat. Let's the feet be seen." She turned around in surprise, and then she saw the little creature, the golden crab. "What? You speak? Can you, you ridiculous crab?" she said, for she was not quite pleased at the crab's remarks. Then she took him up and placed him on a dish. When her husband came home and they sat down to dinner, she presently heard the little crab's voice saying, "Give me some too." They were all very much surprised, but they gave him something to eat. And when the old man came to take away the plate which had contained the crab's dinner, he found it full of gold. And the same thing happened every day, and he soon became very fond of the crab. One day the crab said to the fisherman's wife, "Go to the king and tell him I wish to marry his younger daughter." The old woman went accordingly, and laid the matter before the king, who laughed a little at the notion of his daughter marrying a crab. But he did not decline the proposal altogether, because he was such a prudent monarch, and he knew that the crab was likely to be a prince in disguise. He said therefore to the fisherman's wife, "Go home, old woman, and tell the crab that I will give him my daughter if by tomorrow morning he can build a wall in front of my castle, much higher than my tower, upon which all the flowers in the world must grow and bloom." The fisherman's wife went home and gave the message. Then the crab gave her a golden rod, and said, "Go and strike this rod 3 times upon the ground in the place where the king showed you, and tomorrow morning the wall will be there." The old woman did so, and went away again. The next morning, when the king awoke, what do you think he saw? The wall stood there before his eyes, exactly as he had bespoken it. And the old woman went back to the king and said to him, "Your Majesty's orders have been fulfilled." "That is all very well," said the king, "but I cannot give away my daughter until there stands in front of my palace a garden in which there are 3 fountains, of which must first play gold, second diamonds, and the third brilliants." So the old woman had to strike again 3 times upon the ground with a rod, and the next morning the garden was there. The king now gave his consent, and the wedding was fixed for the very next day. Then the crab said to the old fisherman, "Now take this rod and go and knock on it with a certain mountain. Then a man will come out and ask you what you wish for. Answer him thus: 'Your master, the king, has sent me to tell you that you must send him the golden garment that is like the sun.'" Am I missing a page? Nope. "Make him give you, besides, the queenly robes of gold and precious stones, which are like flowery meadows, and bring them both to me, and bring me also a golden cushion." The old man went and did his errand. When he had brought the precious robes, the crab put on the golden garment, and then crept upon the gold cushion. And in this way the fisherman carried him to the castle, where the crab presented the other garment to his bride. Now the ceremony took place, and when the married pair were alone together, the crab made himself known to his young wife, and he told her how he was the son of the greatest king in the world, and how he was enchanted, so that he became a crab by day, and was only a man at night, and he could also change himself into an eagle as often as he wished. No sooner had he said this than he shook himself, and immediately became a handsome youth. But the next morning he was forced to creep back again into his crab shell. And the same thing happened every day. But the princess's affection for the crab, and the polite attention with which she behaved to him, surprised the royal family very much. They suspected some secret, but though they spied and spied, they could not discover it. Thus a year passed away, and the princess had a son, whom she called Benjamin. But her mother still thought the whole matter very strange. At last she said to the king that he ought to ask his daughter whether she would not like to have another husband instead of the crab. But when the daughter was questioned, she only answered, "I am married to the crab, and only him will I have." Then the king said to her, I will appoint a tournament in your honor, and I will invite all the princes in the world to it. And if any one of them pleases you, you shall marry him. In the evening the princess told this to the crab, who said to her, "Take this rod and go to the garden gate and knock with it. Then a man will come out and say to you, 'Why have you called me, and what do you require of me?' Answer him thus, 'Your master the king has sent me hither to tell you to send him his golden armor and his steed and a silver apple, and bring him down to me.' The princess did so, and brought him what he desired. The following evening the prince dressed himself for the tournament. Before he went, he said to his wife, 'Now mind you do not say when you see me that I am a crab, for if you do this, evil will come of it. Place yourself at the window with your sisters. I will ride by and throw you the silver apple. Take it in your hand, but if they ask you who I am, say that you do not know.' So saying, he kissed her, and repeated his warning once more, and went away. The princess went with her sisters to the window and looked on at the tournament. Presently her husband rode by and threw the apple up to her. She caught it in her hand and went with it to her room, and by her husband came back to her. But her father was much surprised that she did not seem to care about any of the princes. He therefore appointed a second tournament. The crab gave his wife the same directions as before, only this time the apple which he received was from the man of gold. But before the prince went to the tournament, he said to his wife, "Now, I know you will betray me today." But she swore to him that she would not tell who he was. Then he repeated his warning and went away. In the evening, while the princess, with her mother and sisters, were standing by the window, the prince suddenly galloped past on his steed and threw her the golden apple. Then her mother flew into a passion, gave her a box on the ear, and cried out, "Does not even that prince please you, you fool?" The princess, in her fright, exclaimed, "That is the crab himself!" Her mother was still more angry because she had not been told sooner, and ran into her daughter's room, where the crab shell was still lying, took it up, and threw it into the fire. Then the poor princess cried bitterly, but it was of no use. Her husband did not come back. Now we must leave the princess to return to the other person of the story. One day an old man went to the stream to dip a crust of bread he had and he was going to eat, when a dog came out of the water, snatched the bread from his hand, and ran away. The old man ran after him, but the dog reached the door and pushed it open and ran in, the old man following him. He did not overtake the dog, but he found himself above a staircase, which he descended. Then he saw before him a stately palace, and entering, he found a large hall, a table set for 12 persons. He hid himself in the hall behind a great picture, that he might see what would happen. At noon he heard a great noise, so that he trembled with fear. When he took courage to look out from behind the picture, he saw 12 eagles flying in. At this sight, his fear became still greater. The eagles flew to the basin of a fountain, and was there, and bathed themselves, when they were changed into 12 handsome youths. Now they seated themselves at the table, and one of them took a golden goblet filled with wine, and said, "A health to my father!" And the other said, "A health to my mother!" And so the health went around. Then one of them said, "A health to my dearest lady. Long may she live and well. Put a curse on the cruel mother that burnt my golden shell." And so saying, he wept bitterly. Then the youth rose from the table and went back to the great stone fountain, turned themselves into eagles again, and flew away. Then the old man went away too, returned to the light of day, and went home. Soon after, he heard that the princess was ill, and that the only thing that did her good was hearing stories being told to her. He therefore went to the royal castle, obtained an audience with the princess, and told her about the strange things he had seen in an underground palace. No sooner had he finished than the princess asked him whether he could find the way back to the place. "Oh, yes," he answered, "certainly." Now she desired him to guide her there once. The old man did so, and when they came to the palace, he hid her behind the great picture and advised her to keep quite still. And he placed himself behind the picture also. Presently the eagles came flying in, changed themselves into young men, and in a moment the princess recognized her husband among them all, and tried to come out of her hiding place. But the old man held her back. The youths seated themselves at the table. And now the prince said again, while he took up the cup of wine, "A health to my dearest lady, may she live long and well, but a curse on the cruel mother that burnt my golden shell." Then the princess could restrain herself no longer, and ran forward and threw her arms around her husband. And immediately he knew her again, and said, "Do you remember how I told you that day that you would betray me? Now you see that I spoke truth, but all that bad time is past. Now listen to me. I must remain enchanted for 3 months. Will you stay here with me till that time is over?" So the princess stayed with him, and said to the old man, "Go back to the castle and tell my parents I'm staying here." Her parents were very much vexed with the old man who came back and told them this. But as soon as the 3 months of the prince's enchantment were over, he ceased to be an eagle and became a man once more, and they returned home together. Then they lived happily, and we hear the story are happier more.